Hey guys, and welcome to Money Talks News, the podcast making you richer one day at a time. You know, Gen X is often considered the overlooked generation, but you know what? We're going to look right at you today, Gen X. Gen X are people born between 1965 and 1980. So this is a group that should be starting to think about retirement. But are they? Are they going to be ready?
I'm screwed.
As a baby? What?
I said I'm screwed.
Oh, you just interrupted my introduction.
I know. I'm throwing you off on purpose.
Okay.
No, keep going with that wonderful intro, Stacey. Keep going.
No, as a baby boomer, why don't you read the damn introduction? Okay, as a baby boomer generation age, you know what they figured they'd need just under $1 million, $990,000 to be exact, to retire successfully. Gen X, different story entirely. According to the results of a January survey by Northwestern Mutual, the average amount that people across this age group said they would need to retire comfortably is closer to $1.5 million, 50% more. Yet the average Gen X household has only $40,000 in retirement savings compared to the baby boomers' average of $70,000. Which still sounds woefully inadequate.
Yeah, nobody's ready for retirement.
Yeah, apparently. This week, friend of the show, Pam Kruger from Wealth Ramp is going to join us to talk about what you can do if you're worried about hitting your retirement mark. Hello, Pam.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hey.
We are divine.
Good. Let's get anxious.
I'm feeling pretty good because I've got more than $70,000 in savings.
Well, then you're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and I'm right in the middle of boomer land, I think. Anyway, now we do have two boomers on our podcast today, Miranda and Aaron.
You just called me
boomers.
A boomer.
Gen X.
Okay, boomer. No.
Well, I'm a boomer, so I'm getting like really stupid and old, you know. So I don't even know what generation I'm in. Anyway. We have two of these Gen Xers on the podcast, and so I'm going to assume that you guys are far above what you need to retire. That you can retire at any moment at will. Is that true?
Let me look at my wallet. $5, $6, $7. Nope.
So, Pam, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this was your topic. You brought it up. So tell me, why does Gen X feel stress about retirement? What's the problem? What's the big deal?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really take it that seriously until I kept reading these studies. And it was like, wow, Gen X is really anxious. And yet they stand to inherit more money over the next 20 years than any generation in history. And of course, you know, it's going to be a disproportionate number of people who are not going to inherit, because wealthy boomers like you, Stacey, are going to leave behind, you know, the legacy for the next generation. So there's a lot of people that will not inherit at all. But amongst the overall group, you know, to see the level of anxiety was surprising to me. And then just last week, I got into a conversation about this with my friend Neil, who used to produce Money Track, my TV series that was on PBS stations. And he's just turned 50. And I know he's doing really well. And I said, "You're not worried, are you?" And he said, "Pam, I think about it like every day. He's got 2 kids. He's, you know, got to put them through college. And he just has this big perception that it's going to cost a lot more than what he's saved at this point for him to be able to retire comfortably." And this is a guy who doesn't worry. So I was really surprised at that. So he's like already fretting over, "I'm not going to retire when I'm 65. I'll have to retire when I'm 70. And I felt like saying, relax. You know, when the time gets closer, you'll be okay. But I think that his anxiety comes from the fact that, you know, he, like most of us, were weaned on 401k plans. There were no defined, you know, benefit plans. We didn't have any pensions. And they hear these scary stories about Social Security. And there's a lot of reasons why Gen X, you know, has more challenges when it comes to being able to save up
Pam,
more.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but isn't everybody, when they get to be 50 years old, concerned about retirement? I mean, you know, weren't boomers, you know, isn't Gen Z? I mean, isn't everybody going to be concerned about their retirement as they get older?
I think so. I don't think that it's a bad thing to worry, actually. I don't think it's a bad thing to have a little bit of a wake-up call. But it is striking to me when I really looked into this a little bit more deeply and saw, you know, all the core reasons why Gen Xers are struggling, you know, to think that they are going to have enough money in retirement, even compared to boomers, Stacey.
And I think part of that has to do with, right? I mean, you talked about it a little bit when you said like, hey, you've got kids that you need to pay for college. So sometimes they call Gen Xers like the sandwich generation, right? Because we got kids, we're helping them get through college, but we have aging parents that sometimes we may have to take care of. And so for many Gen Xers, the idea of all of this vast wealth, I mean, Stacy's vast wealth is going to go to his Gen X wife, not me, unfortunately. So, so until I get written into Stacy's will, I'm going to have to, like, my parents are probably going to be okay, but I know that cause they've planned and it's going to be fine, but I don't think I'm going to have this big inheritance. I've got 4 siblings and basically we're just going to be looking at it going, okay, well, we might get a little extra bump here. But it's like for a lot of people, they're not looking at it and going, oh yeah, this is like the inheritance I get is going to save me.
Game changer.
Yeah. And then they're just kind of looking at, okay, like all of these things are coming from both ends. What happens if I have to help my parents, my aging boomer parents, and then of course my Gen Z kids going through college? And I'm fortunate. I had a 529 established for my son. So that is covering most of his school costs. And my parents are probably going to be fine in retirement. They've planned ahead. They've got long-term care insurance for the future. They've got a decent nest egg. They're going to be fine. So I'm pretty okay. But a lot of, I think, Gen X people are not feeling that they're going to be okay.
Okay. So I'm a Gen Xer, so and I'm obviously familiar with a lot of other ones. So do you think it's these factors? One, boomers were generally a saver generation. Gen Xers, predominantly spenders. Gen Xers also didn't grow up in this influencer era where information was highly available at a young age, where you're influenced by a bunch of other 20-somethings saying, save money, do this with your money, do that with your money. So we didn't have that huge background in finance. You add on top of that, which like Stacey alluded to, every 50-year-olds have this issue. Now that generation is hitting 50 and inflation's gone through the roof, where even my wife and myself are going, oh man, we should have replaced that roof on our house 10 years ago because now it's ridiculously unaffordable because labor costs are through the roof. And our value of our dollar has dropped drastically. And then now on top of that, you have a bunch of 50-year-olds that are still making the same income level, but yet we're finding out that Gen Z is now making double what you're making. So I think a lot of those are probably in that factor for Gen X.
And then there's the big looming question of, longevity. I think that Gen X is more acutely aware of their parents are living longer. And, I have 2 friends who have parents that are over 100. It's not it's more common now. It wasn't as common earlier. So people, some of this anxiety is coming from the fact that you have all those factors. And then you're saying to yourself, what if I do live to be 98? I'm going to live a really long time. So, it's hopeless. How am I going to have enough money to last me, all through those years? And unlike you, Miranda, support my 34-year-old kid who can't seem to afford an apartment. I'm going to have to continue to pay for him.
Oh yeah. And I'm paying for half my son's rent while he's in school. And actually the only reason why he can even be in that apartment and why he even qualifies for that apartment is because it is my sister's friend. And so he didn't have to go through all of the hoops that you have to jump through now. So he's going to school and I'm paying for half his rent. And, but yeah, like these days, like he and his buddies are trying to get an apartment together and the rents are so much in this area. They've gone up so much in this area to the point where like, if the landlord is requiring 3 times income, like you got to be like, yeah. So 3 times your rent. Sorry. Yeah. Your income has to be 3 times your rent. In a regular 3-bedroom here in Idaho Falls, costs enough that 3 times your rent is going to be $4,800 a month. And it's like, college students are not making $4,800 a month.
No.
And so it's wild.
So
the requirements here.
Can I stop here for a second? Are you guys telling me that Gen X has a harder time than previous or subsequent generations have had? Yes or no?
Well, what we're saying
Is
is
it harder for Gen X?
What we're saying right now is
I'm
that
not
Gen
saying
X is
that.
kind of caught in the middle right now because their kids can't afford these apartments. Their kids are going to school, so they have these financial pressures as far as helping their kids, but they also have potential financial pressures coming down from helping their parents as well. So what we're saying is Gen X is kind of caught in the middle right now. They're at this age where they're kind of stuck in the middle.
But isn't that every generation?
I think every generation does have that issue, but Pam, you tell us, are the stats because of the timing of this hitting the Gen X?
The stats are just showing that the level of anxiety is higher. So whether it's real or whether it's perceived and whether it's positive or negative, because I would argue that a little anxiety, like I said a second ago, a little bit of a wake up call when you're in, my friend Neil's age that's turned 50 of, oh, wow. That to me is not a negative thing. Is he more worried than his baby boomer, dad? Maybe he is more worried. So that's what the research is showing, is that there's an acute anxiety that's in this Gen X exists. And it's for all the reasons, that we just talked about, with all the.
And actually, even if it isn't, even if this isn't specific to Gen X and it's true with all, the fact is that as you approach retirement, whether you're in Gen X or not, you start getting freaked out, right? That's what we're here to solve.
Right, you start thinking about it more.
Yeah, if you're nervous, I have one word for you, and that is Xanax. No, I don't have one word for you. I have several words for you, which is how to prepare so you're not freaked out, so that you can. And that's really what we're going to do here today, right? So we're gonna ask Pam and join in and decide what can we do to help Gen X or any generation as they approach retirement feel less stress.
Yeah, that's the answer. That's the question. That people are asking, and, like Miranda, with what's on your mind, and Aaron. One big thing that before I get to the smaller tips that I think can help people reduce anxiety, but one of the way you frame what you're trying to aim for, when you're in your 40s, when I was in my 40s and you're in the accumulation phase, the target that you were aiming for, that you were shooting for, was like a magic number. And we back in my day, a lot of people, and I bet this was true with you, Stacey, was, you were thinking, I want to be at the $1 million mark by retirement age, because $1 million sounded like it was just, so much. And I'm going to live pretty comfortable, after I retire. Now, that's when you're in your 40s and you're thinking about accumulating and building. Now, what happens is you turn 50 and you get beyond that. And then I think you have to start to do the math differently. And you don't necessarily just want to point and shoot at that magic number anymore, as much as I think it could be more useful to start thinking in terms of using a percentage of your income as the guide. Because one man's $1 million is another man's $5 million is another person's 500,000.
Yeah,
so I think you have to look and start thinking about shifting the mindset from accumulation to what's going to happen when I start spending down. So one of the advisors that's in our network, in the Wealth Ramp network, said it well. He said that he has a client, this is in upstate New York, who had saved $1 million. And as he assessed and looked at this person's retirement at that point, just right now at this point in time, it turns out that it's more than enough. Even though $1 million doesn't sound like a lot anymore, it did when we were in our 40s, it doesn't now. For this couple, because they have a lower expenditure lifestyle and some additional part-time retirement income, they have different retirement expectations. On the other hand, he just met with a couple about maybe a week before that, who he said he had to have a very challenging conversation with that couple, because they were projected to have $3.5 million. Magic number, 3.5 million sounds good, but the model shows them running out of money 18 years after they stop working. So I think that you have to want to start to think about shifting the way you're framing it from a magic number to a percentage of your income, because you've got to start thinking about your lifestyle and how you're spending, what you've been doing, and what you're going to continue to do. And I know that's what Neil said, exactly what he's doing right now. He's thinking about, how am I going to think about living in retirement and how much I'm spending versus what I'm spending now?
Yeah, that's a good thought. Another thing that occurs to me too, and I'm listening to you, Pam, is that my father and my mother-in-law too, who's the exact same age as me, they had government jobs, and so their retirement income is nice. I mean, I think my father was getting more in retirement than he was getting when he was working, because he also had some military disability pay or something like that. But anyway, for me, I've got Social Security. I'm not taking it yet, but anyway, not nearly enough to live on. But I don't have any retirement. I don't have any pension coming in. That's actually not quite true. I have a little pension from a stock brokerage firm I worked for, but generally speaking, my savings are my pension. Whereas my dad or my mother-in-law, they could have no savings and be fine. They're saving money based on what they're getting in retirement, and so that makes a huge difference too. How much you need.
Yeah, and those days are gone too. I mean, both my parents are, living on, well, they played a little bit in the stock market, whatever, but it's Social Security and pensions from where they worked, and that's
maybe that's why your generation, Aaron, and part of mine is stressed, because we don't have this automatic pay that we're going to be getting for the rest of our lives, and health care too. I mean, I get Medicare, but it costs me money a lot.
Right.
Every month.
Right. And we're told to put
maybe we're right to be more stressed out.
Yeah. And we're told, now you got to put your money in a 401k system that, obviously over time has proven, a track record, but, to a lot of people that seems really volatile, and that's scary,
Yeah. But I don't even know if 5 million would replace my income. 5 million in savings would replace my income. Also depends on what interest rates are, right? My parents used to earn 9% on T-bills, and until relatively recently, we were earning 0.1. So that makes it difficult too. I mean, you've got $10 million earning 0.1 on it. It's not the same as earning 10% on it. So it is harder to plan. Now I'm getting stressed out about my retirement.
No, you don't have to get stressed out.
So let's talk about what we need to do. What do we need to do? Let's do this. Let's do something about this.
I don't have any Xanax.
No, but Stacey, it's true. I mean, there are people that I talk to them that, come to me to find an advisor, and they'll say, I'll say, well, they're talking about how much they have savings in savings and investments and what they're planning on living off of. And I just had somebody the other day just tell me they were really concerned. They've got about 5 million, and, really concerned it's not going to be enough. And, it's like, okay, well, let's start imagining what you're really going to be spending and how you're going to be living. And, the good news is that so much of that part of it you can control. You can't control the healthcare costs and what happens medically. You can't control what happens with interest rates and what you're going to earn in a CD or, in a T-bill, or, if inflation's going to continue to stay high. But you certainly can control the side of it where you're like, okay, we've been living this really huge life. We've been supporting our kids. We've been supporting our parents. You just have to look at what you can control in terms of spending. But just a couple of tips that I think can relieve people's anxiety is, first of all, just start to prioritize your own retirement if you can. Because remember, like Miranda, what you pointed out, with people in this Gen X generation, kind of being the sandwich generation, you're really worried about your kids, making sure their well-being, and you're really worried about your parents' well-being and making sure they're financially fortified. But now, Neil's turning 50. Really, it's time to start prioritizing your own retirement, because you don't want to rely on your kids later on. And consider some ways to call for help, to get some reinforcement. It's not that you're not perfectly capable of understanding where you stand, what you've got, what you've been doing, but it doesn't hurt to get a pair of expert deep dive, do a deep dive from, pair of fresh eyes expert who can really do a true evaluation compared to where you think you're at. And look at where you want to be in 15 or 18 years. And then you can really start to plan intelligently, with your eyes wide open. And of course I say, enlist help from a fee-only financial advisor or planner who specializes in retirement income planning, and you're paying them for their advice and their guidance. And then the third tip would be that, if you're 50 and you're turning 50, you're just over 50, you don't even have to wait until your birthday in the year that you turn 50. Don't wait. Start taking advantage of every tax favored opportunity to get more money working for you. So at 50, you can start using the catch-up provisions January 1st, the year you turn 50, even if your birthday's in December. So that allows you, it sounds like it's not a big amount, but on top of the $23,000 in annual contributions to your 401k, you get to add an extra $7,500 to your savings and an extra $1,000 to your IRA. Those catch-up provisions, can realistically, over the next 10, 15 years, let's say 15 years, if that money just grows at, say 7% a year, it's going to add a little bit over $100,000 to your nest egg. So it's meaningful to take advantage of those catch-up provisions.
That makes sense. What else can we do? I'm still feeling a little stressed. Wait a minute. No, I'm not. I'm a rich boomer. I'm not feeling stressed. But if I were these two guys, I'd still be feeling stressed. What else can I do?
I think that you just want to understand that you need to look at this and don't run away from it. Half the reason that I'm anxious over something is because I'm not facing it. I want to run away from it, and I want to procrastinate and put it off because it's much bigger and scarier in your own mind. But I want to welcome the stress testing of the what if scenarios. And if I do it when I'm in my 50s, if I do it when I'm in my early 60s even, it's really better than just keep postponing it and putting it off out of fear, because you can make those adjustments. And I promise you that once you see it and there is a shortfall or there is a gap, you will have remedies and you will be able to make adjustments, even if it means, okay, I'm just going to have to earn some more money part-time longer than I originally expected. But it calms you down. It just chills everything out because you see it and you're like, okay, I can deal with that. At least I know now. It's the not knowing. It's the fear of the unknown that has all these people really freaked out.
Do you think, is it hard for you guys though? I mean, it's relatively easy when you're 60 years old or 68 like me. It's easy to think about retirement because, I mean, you can't really think about anything else. But I don't know if I'm 40 or 45, if I'd be able to focus that much on this. What about it, you guys, you Xers?
Yeah. So I think for me, doing the calculation and even talking to my son about doing the calculation, saying, okay, how much can I set aside each month rather than making it into this big, massive goal I have to try and reach? That's like $1 million or $1.5 million or $500,000 or whatever that big number feels like, is breaking it down and being able to say, okay, I can run a few calculations. I can get some help from a trusted advisor and I can figure out, okay, if I put aside X dollars now and then step that up next year to a higher amount and just kind of step it up little by little, that really helped me get started. Like back in the day, almost 20 years ago now. My gosh, I'm old. But Gen X, Gen X has gotten old. But yeah, back in the day, like 20 years ago, a little less than 20 years ago, I could only put aside $50 a month in my IRA, my Roth IRA. And it didn't feel like a lot, but it felt like I was doing something. And so I did it. And then over time, as I've stepped that up, I've been able to put in more and more. Before I knew it, I was maxing out my Roth IRA. Then I was opening a SEP because I could do more with a SEP IRA than with a Roth, a regular old Roth. And so I just started putting more and more. Health savings accounts were introduced. And so I started putting money in the HSA and maxing out the HSA. But it was like a step-by-step process that like took some time over the years to get to. And so I think, you can even start that now, even if you're Gen X now and you don't have a whole lot, take a step back and say, hey, where do I have some room to put a little bit extra in these investments? Where can I put some extra in there? And let's just start bumping that up now, and then increase it as we go. But let's start it out in something that feels manageable and then step it up.
I did a video last night I think it's for TikTok or Instagram, or I forgot what it was. Anyway, I wrote the script last night, and it was for people who were 50. What to do about retirement. And I said, the reason, what you want to do is you want to think about how you're going to retire. I mean, are you going to be a person who tours Europe, or are you going to be a person who sits on the beach? Obviously you may not know that now, but do your best and figure out what are your expenses, and then figure out what your income is going to be. And you can do that by going to Social Security or estimating how much your portfolio is going to grow or whatever. And then if you've got a gap between these two things, how much you're going to spend versus how much you're going to have coming in, now's the time to do something, because you got 10 years. Your options obviously narrow as you approach retirement. So starting at 10 years from retirement is a good thing to do. And what are your options? Your options are legion. There's tons. You can make more money. You can ask for a raise. Not you two guys on this podcast can't ask for a raise, but other people who don't work for me can. You can, get a side gig. You can make sure that your savings are earning as much as possible. If you don't have anything in the stock market, maybe now's the time to get some, because the difference between earning 10% and 2% is monster when it's compounded over time. So there are options. From side gig to, do you have a budget? Do you know where your money's going? Paying down some debt might be a good idea, because that's expensive. There are things you can do, and the sooner you get started doing it, the better off you're going to be, and the less stress you're going to have, because you're going to be looking at your issues.
I also see some Gen Xers in my world who are doing really well. They're both husband and wife are working, and they've got kids, and they've got a lot going on. But they've also got, it looks like they're making a lot of money on the outside, but they are really living at the limit. They've got the second home, that they just bought at the lake. They've got too much stuff, and they know it. And it's like, I think that there's that aspect of it, two things together. It's like, if you can ask for a raise at work, or if you can expect it, or you're going to earn a big bonus, cool. And you're going to get that higher income and bump it up. But if you're worrying about your retirement years, and you're living large, and you're living too large, and that's the time to kind of let some air out of the balloon and start to say, I want my kids to grow up with all these things and this great stuff that I didn't have when I was a kid. But I also need to, really curb the spending now, and not, because I don't know that I'm going to be getting a raise that's going to constantly stay ahead of this. Because, as Neil turns 50 and gets beyond, he gets it. Pretty soon you start to become an older employee.
Yeah.
And, your upside there could be great, but might not be as great as you think in your mind, and yet you continue to live the big lifestyle.
Yeah. Let me ask you this too. I don't want to quit this podcast without going to addressing people, because you guys started this by saying sandwich generation. You got to take care of your kids. You got to take care of your parents. What about the people who just don't have the damn money? I mean, it's easy to say, find some money, pay down some debt, save more in your 401k. But what if you're just barely making ends meet? What if you are taking care of your kids or your parents and you just don't have any money? I understand this isn't an easy fix, but what do you tell somebody like that?
That's when I start to say, because I know, we all know people who are such caretakers for everybody else. And some people just will not have an option except to work longer, assuming that they can, because they are in a situation where their loved ones completely depend on them and rely on them for income every single month. Or it's a situation where you have to graciously and gradually put yourself first a little bit and say, I've got to save myself here. I've been doing this for a number of years. My siblings haven't really stepped up to help mom and dad, but every situation is different, but you have to do both those things. You have to put yourself first, and yet you also have to be, you're the kind of person who you want to be the caregiver, the person who helps. There's no easy answer, but to be aware of your own needs in retirement. And maybe think of it as, again, like, I don't want the next generation to have to worry about taking care of me. So I have to start prioritizing myself.
Well, one thing I've mentioned on this podcast many times too, Pam, is another thing you can do is you can marry someone from the younger generation. See, I'm married to a Gen X, so I've got a little 401k at work right now. So she's going to, so why don't you guys, you Gen Xers, marry a Gen Z and live off of them? They can't hear us, don't they?
Oh, wait, let me tell my wife. Stacey's got this great idea.
We'll check back with you on that one, Stacy.
Okay, guys, we are out of time on this one, but we're never out of topic. Dig a little deeper. You're going to find links to lots more info in our show notes. And by the way, I forgot. I need to shamelessly plug you more, Pam. Pam, by the way, owns WealthRamp, which is something, a matching service. And correct me if I'm not saying this right, Pam, but it's a matching service putting you in contact with a compatible financial advisor that can help you with questions like we've had today.
Exactly.
So WealthRamp is where you want to go for that.
Thank you.
Now, also, folks, thanks for joining us, but do remember to do your own research, consult your own experts before acting on anything you learn here. That's what I say to keep you from suing me, in case we say something weird. And remember, if your goal is to make more, to spend less, to retire rich, your online home is moneytalksnews.com. And don't forget to check out Miranda's online home as well. That is Miranda Marquit, MARQUIT.com. And I just gave you Pam's website, wealthramp.com. Go visit her there. If you got a question, comment, or topic you'd like to suggest, well, tell us about it. You can email us at hello@moneytalksnews.com. Pam, you know you're one of my favorite people. I'm going to be counting the seconds until I get you back on the air, which is actually not going to be long because we're about to record another podcast. But thanks for being here, Pam.
Thank you, guys.
I'm Stacy Johnson.
I'm Miranda Marquit.
I'm Aaron Freeman.
Thanks for hanging out with us, folks. We'll see you right here next time.